All right, so when you're doing these puzzles, how do you solve them? Well, you look for what's called seeds of tactical destruction. Things that you could do to the opponent that, or things in your opponent's position that would tell you that there might be a tactic. So let's look at, if it's black to play and win, we're looking at problems for white. Well, right now white's up a pawn, but he's behind in development, which is a seed in itself, and black has the bishop pair, which means he has two bishops and white doesn't. All right, so what could black do? What's wrong with white's position? Well, we see maybe his king might be a little weak. G2 and H2 are undefended. That's an idea, and we see his pieces aren't out very much. It doesn't look like you can trap his queen or his knight or anything. But here's a big seed right here. We see that the rook and the queen are on the same diagonal. When you see a rook and a queen on the same diagonal, you're either looking to, pin the rook to the queen or skewer the queen to the rook, possibly with a light squared bishop, and you're also maybe possibly having some ideas with maybe with the black queen. All right, so here the move that immediately we'd like to play is bishop a6. But if you're one of those players who said, gee, I can't play bishop a6 because if the queen takes the bishop, he just wins my bishop, so that's no good. We call that a quiescence error, because what you're trying to do is make this work. And what I've found from teaching a lot of people is when they have these positions in games, they don't see moves like bishop a6 very much because they see it as being unsafe. But when they have a puzzle and they know there's something there, then they push further and they say, well, how can I make bishop a6 work? Which is what they should do during a game too. And the answer here is actually pretty easy. That's why it's in the Bain book, which is not an advanced book. If you play bishop a6 and white tries to take the bishop, which isn't his best move, then black has bishop takes h2 check, which is a discovered attack on the queen on a6, and after king takes h2, black plays queen takes a6, and when the smoke clears here, black now has a queen for a knight and a bishop, which is a winning advantage. So after bishop a6, queen takes a6 doesn't work. But what else can white do after bishop a6? He could just save the queen, move the queen to a safe square, let's say b3 or something, but then after bishop takes f3 and bishop takes f1 and king takes f1, black has won the exchange. Now, what's interesting is black didn't win as much as it really looked like he won. He started out with the bishop pair for a pawn, so he's down half a pawn. And here he won a rook for a bishop, which is about 1 3/4 pawns, but he had to give up the bishop pair. So he gained 1 1/4 pawns. Well, 1 1/4 pawns is a nice gain, but he was already down a pawn. So if we look at the position now, he's up the exchange for a pawn. So the position isn't all that terrible for white. Now, of course, black here can play bishop takes h2 and get another pawn. So maybe when we're looking at this position, we should look at ways that white could try to play to save the h2 pawn. And of course, it doesn't look like he's got a lot like that. I think the computer says here, let's bring in the computer and take his analysis a little bit. We'll move the board up a little bit for this so you can see it. The computer suggests queen c6. And now if bishop takes f1 and king takes f1, the computer doesn't like bishop h2 anymore because white can trade queens and then trap the bishop with g3. So what the computer suggests after bishop a6, queen c6, believe it or not, as you can see, the computer doesn't even think that bishop takes f1 is the best move. Now that's the answer to the puzzle in the book, is bishop takes f1 and wins the exchange. Here the computer thinks that bishop e5, because black's ahead in development, is just as good. For instance, after queen takes, bishop takes, suppose the rook tries to save itself and plays rook to d1, but now he's in a pin on the d file and c5 will win even more. If he plays rook to e1, then black can simply play bishop takes d4 and the rook can't go. So in this position, there's no way to save the rook anyway, and black has pressure on the knight, and he's still ahead in development. If the knight moves, that would let black take the rook and then maybe bring the rook down. So this actually is, the computer thinks, is as good or better as the solution in the book. And that happens sometimes. That's why I check books especially books that were originally written, several years ago, against the computer just to see if their answer is the best one. Grandmaster John Nunn has noted that if you don't do that and there's more than one good move that wins the game, then it's kind of not fair to the reader to have multiple ways to win.